Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay Raghavan. We have had a fascinating presentation. It's now the time for discussions. If you agree, sir, we will take questions in groups of 3 or so that we have a cluster of 3 questions. So I will take questions in groups of 3 at a time. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself. And
I am H.S. Sharma, IIT Bombay graduate, first batch, 1959. I am the senior most in this gathering. Sir, I have simple questions. I write to the government, nobody replies. Probiotic, there is no, please listen to me, it is benefit to all of you. Probiotic has been dumped on us without any research on Indian gut flora. I write to every day, nobody replies. It is just crores and crores are going out of my country without any benefit to anybody. Nuclear, it has been banned in Sweden, it has been banned in Germany, we are going after it. Please refer to the expenditure on Chernobyl nuclear disaster. The cost of civil construction is the highest ever recorded on this earth. Why are we going after nuclear when others have banned it? Nobody replies. Please let me complete it, benefit all of you.
No,
Sir, I am the senior most, give some criteria.
Okay, you have 1 minute.
IME 9. Nobody replies where they have done the research. You just publicize, take tablet, diabetes, 5 rupees. Where they have done, what was the dose, to whom it was given? Nobody ever replies. Water. We go after the latest foreign sensors are living. I have not used it. Water is flowing. Do we need this technology? Please listen to me. Sweden, they have put $60 charge on airfare. They don't want, it costs 47 times more fuel than traveling by road. Earth is getting warmer. Human life left on this earth is 100 years. It took nature 1 million years to raise CO2 level to 200 ppm.
We'll give the next question a chance and we'll come back to you later.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. My name is Chandra Vikash. I am from IIT Kharagpur 93 and I am Calcutta. My question, sir, to you is that science broke away from philosophy, where it had, cosmology and psychology and social sciences all together, and it kept breaking away. If I were to rephrase the title of the seminar today, Science, Technology and Innovation in Building a Knowledge Economy to feed the same voracious, bloody consumerist lifestyle that we are addicted to, and that has brought us to the brink of catastrophe. So karma is now dictating earth, and earth is dictating, together are dictating dharma. So knowledge economy is an oxymoron, and everything, the disconnect and the bizarre outcomes that we see flow out of this. So as long as, and I'm very happy that Indian bureaucrats have, due to their lethargy, stamped and stopped all your nonsensical, fantasies and dystopias of nuclear research and all that. My submission, dear sir, is that the younger generation is not only far better informed, it is not in the same time warp that you are stuck in. You may talk about bureaucratic hassles. We are more conscious that we are more knowledgeable about the cosmology and why science should not confine itself to just physically. And
you come to the point.
Yeah,
please.
my question is that why aren't we?
Are you two part of the same team or?
Okay.
Yeah.
Please
see,
come.
Yeah, my point is that why have we jettisoned, lots of important aspects of science to metaphysics and only confined ourselves to bloody and voracious consumerist lifestyles and fooding more of it?
That's
Thank
your
you.
question. Next.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for that enlightening lecture that you gave. My question to you, sir, is that when you talk about there's being a gap between the industry and the ministry. Sorry, I'm Abhinav Kumar. I have just finished my master's in physics from Sikkim Manipal University. I'm right now preparing for the national eligibility test for PhD in India. My question, sir, was how do we leverage so-called MOOCs, MOOCs, which present to us an opportunity to bring about the latest in science and technology to the masses, and how do we go about distributing that to the masses? And when I say masses, the small towns and the villages in India, and how do you see that impacting the future of India? Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very coherent and focused question. Good.
Would you like me to answer that?
You could answer
But not the other two.
as you like. As you like. He has asked about MOOCs.
Well, thank you very much. Now these massive online open courses of various kinds are invaluable. There is a view that no matter how good they are, you can't dispense with a teacher. But given the complexities of our teaching environment, that having access to a quality course is better than not having access. The challenges, however, are many. These courses are available. The question is, are you able to use it well? The MHRD has got its portal which links those courses, both international and national, to people in a manner where there are potential intervening teachers who can explain. My point is that these are going to be very valuable. They're useful for self-learning, for a variety of methods. People use them hugely. But we need to have ways by which we can have each of these courses, the text of those courses available, so that those who have issues with accents and so on can read the text, but importantly, tell their mentor or teacher, saying at minute 8.42 I have this problem, but also have these translated simultaneously into languages which students are more comfortable with. That's a major challenge and a major project which we're trying to push.
Okay, next round. Ambassador Sharma.
Thank you. It was really very stimulating listening to you. I have just two questions. One is that how can you ensure that a kind of a policy framework remains intact for 10, 20 years without coming into conflict as in its praxis doesn't get distorted? For instance, as you described China, they've been working on things. Once they set out to do, then nobody changes it. It continues. In our case, what happens is that you start on a track, then somebody else comes, wiser fellow, he changes it. So we never, as you say, spiraling, we never quite go to this. How can you ensure that? And the second point which I want to say is that in terms of society, are we, constantly touching on the poverty trap, in the sense that to do many things big, you need certain redundancies to be created. But our poverty trap comes and eats into the redundancies. Very, very simple example, like you need highways, but the highways pass through very difficult, poor societies for whom that highway has no use. So they start blocking it. They start blocking it in their own ways. So you come across a development process where any redundancy that you create is eaten up. And your science establishment, you have that Promise of Power book by Ramanna, who again and again attacks this DAE, which you said one of the crystal examples, for overspending, which we find, looking back, it was not overspending. But so there are people who come and attack. And how do you protect that?
I forgot your first question.
I said the policy how to maintain that. Sorry, sorry, talking too much.
No.
Shall we do one more?
I'm also from the IIT Bombay, 71.
Yes.
So are the other two.
No.
Mrs. Relia, DST, please.
I'm Sadhna Relia. I work with the Department of Science and Technology. My question is that when we talk of knowledge economy, the human talent is very critical. The quality of education that we give for our science and engineering and allied disciplines do not make us globally or nationally employable. So there is something that needs to be relooked. I would like to ask you that when we created triple ITs, the Indian Institute of Information Technology, we created ICERs, Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. Did these two kind of institutions give us better value proposition than the classic universities or the IITs when we look at knowledge economy per se?
So thank you for that very fascinating talk.
Name?
My name is Arul. I teach at the National Law University in Delhi. So during the lecture, you mentioned that one of the changes you'd like to see is giving rights to the scientists over all kinds of IP they generate. But when we are talking about such an approach, should we also talk about the need for sharing of resources? And I'm asking this particularly because I know that for a fact that you played a major role in the DBT DST open access policy. So as a scientific advisor to the government of India, can we expect some steps from the side of you for making more sharing of resources?
Okay.
Okay, the trick point is that about policy permanence, I don't think policy U-turns, Pallav after that is another question. I don't think policy U-turns are that common. Once policy decisions are taken at a high level, governments changing, bureaucrats changing usually don't turn it back. There are situations where pressure from below, political winds, global winds might slow things down or not. Those are separate issues. But a flip-flop mechanism is not something which is there. Those programs go. And there are examples of programs which have gone on really well over long periods of time, driven by, quintessential bureaucrats or by science bureaucrats or by, institutional leaders. And those which succeed do so for one very simple reason: the quality of leadership. That is something which we need to focus on, having more people who can take on informed leadership roles. That is a challenge, and I don't think the policy flip-flops are that much of an issue. I mean, they would be there. As I said, there are all sorts of parameters which can change that.
The other question was that should we pursue scientific excellence when we have so much poverty? Basically, I think that
Yeah. So that again is a, persuasive complexity. You starkly illustrated it quite well about a highway going over a region where there's no obvious direct benefit. The question is that, do you want to, as you rightly put it, get trapped in a situation where the immediate benefits of a marginal economy are obvious and are something which you want to protect, rather the uncertain future of a changing one? And this is a classic situation where during the collapse of the Soviet Union, many people, who lived in a very economically and otherwise maybe oppressive context, felt a loss because a poor certainty was better than, an uncertainty of various kinds. So that's the kind of issue which needs to be dealt with. It's a complex political, social issue, and different contexts have it differently. I mean, there's a huge social value in, contexts which immediately give benefit, health, primary education, and so on. But there's also a huge resistance in those kinds of contexts even for dramatic changes for economic growth, right? So people can see benefits and they will accept those kinds of benefits of vaccines, drugs, and so on, but they won't see benefits of having a manufacturing unit in their locality which can disrupt stuff. And this is a big challenge in a growing economy. You would much rather have a chemical plant in a neighboring state than in your state and use the product for you rather than have it in your state. So these are issues which we need to deal with. They are tough ones.
triple ITs and IISc.
So, these things, there are two views. One is you create institutions for a specific purpose and they must be straitjacketed and follow that purpose. Triple IITs are supposed to be finishing schools and they should not give BTech, MTech, PhD degrees, right? But then you find that people who come in want other kinds of degrees, they want to be like everyone else, and that changes. That contributes to the growth of the economy by a random approach. Similarly, the ICERs will fulfill markets as the markets demand. So this is broadly what I would call a spray and pray approach, where you seed at the foundations a diversity of institutions of various kinds, and these are extraordinarily valuable insurance against unknown unknowns. These are random people who are trained well, who are passionate about their work, and they can deal with problems. At the next level of the pyramid and higher up, you need to have structures which are more focused. As you go higher, these have become more and more focused. So you don't have ISRO randomly getting into the house building industry as a collateral, because that can be a good source of income. They focus on the space program. So you as you go up in certain directions, you focus. And the issue of IP, there are two components here. You must have open access to knowledge. Publicly derived research must be freely available, and that should be the case all over the world. So we are trying to push very hard now to work with our stakeholders within the country and with similar global stakeholders, so that big publishing houses who charge huge amounts for subscription to access publicly funded research all over the world, and in addition charge author publishing fees to publish over there. How can we deal with that situation, which is created in no small measure by the metrics we use, perhaps wrongly, for promotions and evaluation? So that twin challenge has to be dealt with. Pallav had a question.
Yeah, better.
Pallav Bagla, correspondent, Science Magazine and Science Editor, NDTV. Chief, a lovely lecture. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Now you're the principal scientific advisor to the Government of India. Now, what do you advise the government on how to bridge this seeming divide which we see every day between traditional ancient knowledge and modern knowledge, the kind of stuff which both Dr. Sharma and you have piloted for a while, and this whole business we see of Shashi Tharoor talking about the pre-colonial Vishwaguru and the ministers talking of the ancient Vedic Vishwagurus which we were, and this aspiration to be a Vishwaguru in 21st century. Now, what is the advice you would give, and how do you bridge this gap? And this is a very, it's not a flippant question, because this is a question which is bothering a lot of people. You see ministers talking of Sita being a test tube baby, you see Pushpak Viman stuff, but thought experiments have gone somewhere. So where do you bridge this?
So you want to have one more, or this is a...
Okay, the last round, because we are running out of time. Yes, you would decide. Second row.
I apologise for not being an IIT graduate. Thank you for...
Your name, please.
I'm Dan Shah from UK Research and Innovation. Thank you so much for a fantastic lecture. So much of this will be familiar to many countries that have aspirations to use science and technology and innovation for good, in terms of overcoming silos, increasing public investment, open access. Something that strikes me as unique to India, and I would really welcome your reflections on the dilemma, is the human capital dimension. India, I think, has a larger proportion of the world's future workforce in its youth dividend than perhaps any country has ever. But also the human capital threshold for future growth is advancing as industries become more knowledge intensive. How do you think we can all bridge that dilemma?
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3.
My God.
Okay, thanks. Keep it short.
So shall I answer these two first? Yes. Because otherwise, my little mind can't handle five questions at the same time. So, Pallav's point, one should step back and appreciate the approximate nature of real life, day-to-day living and decision making. We each of us, each of our institutions, each of our conglomerates and whatever we are associated in, are a bundle of contradictions. You might have a very strong superstitious view about something, but you would at the same time, you can be the most astute businessman in the world. You're not going to be fooled around. So contradictions in our day-to-day life and inconsistencies are common. The question is, how does that come to bear on scientific method and scientific decision making? The answer to that was given, I think, something like 75, 80 years ago, very beautifully by Niels Bohr, where he talked about how there are basically two kinds of processes which are internally consistent, which we use to analyze two different domains. One is when we talk about metaphysics, religion, and so on and so forth, and we have internally consistent rules as humans to deal with that. And the other is when we deal with science and technology and so on. And quite often, he pointed out, that the same brain can have these two compartmentalized. Creative tension comes when this compartmentalization at the boundary breaks down and there is an interface. And that is a source of constant tension for thousands of years. You cannot have a situation where you have a religious viewpoint or a viewpoint of nationalism or a viewpoint which is the end of it in a situation where science constantly questions every kind of viewpoint, including its own, right? And therefore, there will always be this tension at this interface. And as long as we accept that that tension is normal, it's fine. But the more fundamental issue which Pallav raises is actually a deeper one, which goes beyond one's views or articulations on X or Y or Z topic. It's a deeper angst which many societies, many non-Western societies are bringing up now. China in its own way, India in its own way. As Philippines and Indonesia grows, you will see it there. The African countries, you will see it there. You will see it in South America. And this is, aren't we also intellectuals? Don't we also have a viewpoint? Or did all intellect, all ideas come from a certain defined thread which we are taught? Doesn't our view matter? We also have, interesting, myths and creation ideas and so on, which are taken and, metaphors put in our science. Why are certain things acceptable and certain things are not? Now here too, there is a dangerous line which needs to be balanced. It is right and important for societies and cultures to find their place and not be intellectually vassal in developing questions in science. But to be confused and think that just by asserting that that viewpoint should be there, that it happens, is incorrect. It doesn't happen by assertion. It happens by deep training, by work, by sweat, and thinking independently. All of that is needed. You can't just say, I am, a big country, and therefore, and I need to think independently, and therefore I am thinking independently. The first two components are right. I'm a big country. I need to think independently, right? I may be a small country. I might need to think independently. But the fact, am I thinking independently? That's a different matter. And that requires deep training, right? And that deep training is also part of the tradition of all these countries. But that needs to be executed in our context really rigorously. So it's all very well to desire to be world leaders. It's an important articulation. Form and content, sometimes one is ahead, sometimes the other is ahead. But content can never be too far behind form, and mere content which doesn't communicate and doesn't create a form which inspire people is also useless. So we must keep pace with form and content. We must aspire, but we must match that by really hard work. No, you already had a chance.
Is it become a religious cult by itself?
Listen.
So no, I've got two.
It has become the latest religious cult.
Please. Let's have discipline.
So
And
what
let's
is
be
the-
scientists.
What is the next point?
Next,
No, someone else had
the
a-
next point about human capital. In
Human
India.
capital, yeah. So that actually segues very nicely to what I was saying now. It's again all very well to say there's enormous human capital, but that human capital needs to be rapidly put in place. My feeling is that a practical translation of that, one of the biggest challenges we face today, can be transformed into an opportunity. The biggest bogey which we have put in front of us today is the threat of cyber physical systems taking over jobs in a world where human workforce will be made obsolete. That actually, Ashutosh and his team have put forth proposals which are now going through the final stages to have an extraordinary training component nationally where India becomes a major force in using cyber physical systems, because these are areas where young people who can be trained to maturity very rapidly can have an enormous impact. So there are horizontals of these which cut across all disciplines, combined with deep training in every discipline, is something which can be very exciting. But there's no escape from every one of these exhortations about how human capital is important, or how we must think deeply, become the teacher to the world. All of them are valid, but they need to be translated into, little things being done steadily on the ground.
Okay, you had a question.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm Dinesh Abrol. I was the first guinea pig to be trained in science and technology studies in this country. We learned it along, while the world was evolving in the area of science and technology and innovation. Congratulations, Dr. Vijayaraghavan, you have become PSA at a very difficult time, I will put it this way, and it was evident from the kind of questions that you faced. When I entered this room, I was skeptical, and I'm skeptical about one thing, that you have generated a lot of hope and optimism in us, saying that now the translational mechanisms are in place, are being worked upon very actively. Maybe you know really certainly well, but I'm going to take two examples which I deal with on a virtually day-to-day basis. One is the pharmaceutical industry. It's a jewel which we have actually created in the hard way through a policy and institutional building framework. But it's today manufacturing is hollowed. You must have seen today the report from the Ministry of Commerce where the API challenge, the active pharmaceutical ingredient challenge, that we are dependent on China, has been actually brought out. And I have been trying to see that pharma parks or the cluster development policies, which have been talked about for now about 4 to 5 years and so on, etc., not a single one which is yet in place. Department of Pharmaceutical, a department was created, it is still hollowed out in respect of domain expertise. It hasn't been actually staffed with people who would have knowledge. I see the departments lacking institutional memory. They do not know what happened, let's say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I can give you example after example, and including in Department of Science and Technology, I see a challenge of that particular kind. So the second point which I'm going to see, similarly take agriculture. Today the farming community of this country faces a huge challenge. And I think I do not know enough of mechanisms which were required to be put in place being there now at the moment, where when people are crying for support of all kind.
Okay.
So what I am saying, and I'll conclude that, sir, I will conclude, sir, I will not, as the last sentence, please be,
one
please,
sentence.
just one sentence. So I am still skeptical. If the translators and the intermediary mechanisms, whether have been put in place or not, I don't see from these examples, and I hope, since you know better, maybe they are in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm K.K. Roy Chaudhary, Energy Environment Engineers. So one short question to you, should not our science, technology
to come and work here in our science and technology ecosystem? A very few of our centers have that capability and attractiveness now, but many of them can rapidly reach that situation. enabling policy for major R&D investment will allow our major ecosystems not only to be rapidly internationally competitive, but to provide people to the R&D ecosystems which grow around that. And that's happened in smaller economies globally. We have all the components to put it in place in our context, and we can do that very rapidly.
We have run out of time, so I'd like to thank Dr. Vijay Raghavan for sparing his valuable time to be with us and give us the benefit of his incisive viewpoints. He's outlined a number of challenges for science, technology and innovation in India. Also, he has underlined the huge potential and capability that we have and the numerous ways in which we can move ahead. We are all with him in this effort, and we wish him every success in the road ahead. I'm sure I speak for all of you in that. I would like to thank the India Habitat Center and Dr. Mukesh Kumar for being here, and every one of you for your attention and active participation and questions. I realize that we could have spent much more time on the discussion, but I'm sure you will all take back with you much food for thought, and we very much appreciate your coming here today. Thank you.
Yeah, we might, of course. How are you?
Yeah, so our work on disaster
How's it going?
infrastructure is moving.
Okay.
We've got some allocation.
Good.
We'll just do a photograph.
Nice meeting you.
Okay. Make it quick, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, very good. Thank you so much.
Sergeant?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Great. Thank you very much.